What if I told you that sometimes the loudest place on earth can suddenly fall into a completely different kind of silence? Not because the game stopped, not because the crowd left, but because a single voice unexpectedly fills the stadium. And for a few seconds, tens of thousands of people are listening to something more than the game itself. Recently, that exact moment happened inside one of the most legendary stadiums in the world, Tokyo Dome, a place known for hosting historic concerts, championship games, and unforgettable moments in sports history. On March 8th, during the intense matchup between Korea and Taiwan in the World Baseball Classic, the stadium was already filled with energy. Baseball fans from across Asia had gathered. The cheers were thunderous. The tension between every pitch and every swing could be felt throughout the entire arena. But then something happened that no one was expecting. Through the massive speakers surrounding the stadium, a familiar melody began to play, Running Wild, the solo song by Jin. And suddenly, the atmosphere inside Tokyo Dome shifted in a way that felt almost cinematic. Jin's voice, clear, powerful, yet deeply emotional, spread through the stadium like a wave. Even among the roar of baseball fans, the song stood out. Because there's something unique about Jin's voice. It has a warmth that feels nostalgic, a clarity that cuts through noise, and a strength that fills even the largest spaces. For fans who recognized the song immediately, the moment felt surreal. Imagine attending one of the biggest baseball tournaments in the world, and suddenly hearing a voice you know so well echoing through the same arena. But for Jin, moments like this are no longer rare. They are becoming part of a larger story, because Running Wild is not just another K-pop track. It represents a very important chapter in Jin's life. After fulfilling his military service, something every Korean male celebrity must complete, Jin returned to fans in June 2024. For many fans, that return was emotional. They had waited, they had counted the days, and when he finally came back, the anticipation for his music was enormous. Just a few months later, in November, Jin released his first solo album, Happy. The title track of that album was Running Wild. From the very first listen, fans noticed something different about the song. It wasn't just energetic, it wasn't just catchy. It carried a feeling of freedom, a sense of movement, almost like a celebration of finally being able to run forward again, and listeners around the world felt that emotion immediately. Within just 10 days of its release, Running Wild achieved something extraordinary. More than 1.7 million posts on TikTok were already using the track. That level of viral momentum placed the song among the most used Korean male solo songs in TikTok history. In fact, it became the second most used Korean male solo song ever on the platform, behind the viral phenomenon Way Back Home by Sean. Think about that for a moment. Millions of people across different countries, cultures, and languages, all using the same song to create their own stories. Dance videos, travel clips, emotional edits, moments of celebration, moments of nostalgia. And in every one of those videos, Jin's voice. But the song's journey didn't stay inside social media. It started crossing into spaces that K-pop rarely reaches. In December of that same year, Running Wild appeared during a major National Football League broadcast. The game featured the Buffalo Bills and the Detroit Lions. Millions of viewers were watching across the United States. And during the broadcast, Jin's song played on national television through CBS primetime. It was a small moment on the surface, just a few seconds of music in a sports broadcast. But moments like that show something powerful, because it means the song had traveled far enough to reach audiences who may have never even heard of K-pop before. And then something even more unexpected happened. In June, during South Korea's 21st presidential election vote counting broadcast, Running Wild appeared multiple times. Political broadcasts are usually serious, formal, focused on numbers and results. Yet somehow, Jin's song became part of that national moment. It created buzz online and surprised viewers who suddenly heard the familiar melody during such a historic event. By this point, it almost seemed like Jin's music had developed a strange ability to appear everywhere. Sports, politics, social media, television. But the story didn't stop there, because another one of Jin's songs began creating emotional moments on an even larger stage. The 2026 Milan Cortina Winter Olympics. For 3 different days during the Olympic events, Jin's song Don't Say You Love Me echoed through the arenas. The track comes from his second solo mini-album, Echo, and the moments when it played were incredibly emotional. After the pair's free skate performance by Canada's Leah Pereira and Trent Michaud, after the men's short program performance by Italy's Daniel Grassel, after Switzerland's Kimi Ripond finished her women's short program, the arena speakers filled with Jin's voice. Figure skating is already one of the most emotional Olympic sports. Athletes train their entire lives for just a few minutes on the ice, and when their performance ends, the atmosphere inside the arena becomes quiet, reflective, almost fragile. That is exactly when Jin's song played. Soft, melodic, crystal clear. For many listeners, the moment felt almost cinematic, like the closing scene of a movie. And as it turns out, the song was not just emotionally powerful, it was also historically successful. Don't Say You Love Me reached #1 on the global Spotify chart. That achievement made Jin the first Asian singer to top the chart among songs released in 2025. It also became the most streamed K-pop song of the year on Spotify, a rare accomplishment even among the biggest global artists. But Jin's connection to global sports events goes back even further than that. In July 2024, during the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris, Jin participated in one of the most symbolic traditions in sports history. He carried the Olympic torch. Among the many stars who participated, French magazine Paris Match highlighted 31 torchbearers. And Jin stood out for one very unique reason. He was the only foreign celebrity included in the feature. The magazine described him with striking words. They called him a true prince who ascended to the throne 235 years after the French Revolution. A poetic description for a global pop icon. But perhaps it reflects something about the way the world sees Jin. Because he isn't just admired for his music, he's admired for his presence, his visuals, his voice, his calm yet charismatic personality. Fans often refer to him as the visual king. Others call him the vocal king, and when his songs begin echoing through stadiums filled with athletes, fans, and millions of viewers watching from home, those titles start to feel even more meaningful. Because music has a strange power. It connects moments, it becomes the background to memories, the soundtrack to victories, to emotional performances, to historic nights in stadiums. And lately, Jin's voice seems to appear exactly in those moments. The World Baseball Classic, the NFL, the Olympics, massive arenas filled with tens of thousands of people, millions watching around the world. And somewhere in those moments a song begins. A voice rises above the crowd. Clear, warm, unmistakable, and suddenly, even in the middle of the world's biggest sporting events, it feels like the stage belongs to Jin.